everybody, welcome to Garden Time with Belle. I am not in the garden at the moment. As you can plainly see, I'm in my home office because today's video is going to be a little bit different. Today's video is going to be about a recent garden party that I just hosted this past weekend. I thought it'd be fun for you all to see a little bit of behind the scenes of my party, and stay tuned because at the end of today's video, I'm going to share with you all a Q&A session that's based on the questions that my guests submitted when we had our own Q&A session during the party. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for being here. I am so glad that you found me. I'm going to ask everybody to please like and subscribe so I can continue to grow my channel and reach more gardeners just like you. So let's get into it. So I've got my coffee here. And I have some notes because the first thing I'd love to do with you all is share with you my top tips for throwing a garden party. And just a little bit of background, some things you might not have learned about me yet through watching my videos. I would say that people know me for really having passion about three things. One, entertaining. Love to entertain. Have been doing it for many years. I just get so much joy out of kind of coming up with a theme, the decor, the food, any kind of activities or games. In fact, 40 years ago now, my husband and I started what we call our supper club, and that means that the two of us and three other couples, we gather together on a regular basis and host themed dinner parties. And Alan and I started that as newlyweds years and years ago, and it's still going strong. So we have a lot of experience throwing gatherings, and we just love it. It's just a lot of fun to gather with friends and family and celebrate the ordinary and making it extraordinary sometimes, romancing the ordinary. That would be what this garden party was all about. So that's one of my passions. Of course, gardening is what you know me for, is a second passion. And thirdly, I would say I'm passionate about cooking, and lots of my friends and family know that. In fact, I had a cooking blog for several years where I uploaded lots and lots, about over 100 recipes of mine. So, I get a lot of joy out of feeding people too. So the garden party that I just hosted this past weekend really is a combination of those three passions. All right, so let's get into the first half of the video. First half, I'm going to share with you my tips for hosting a garden party. And the second half, I'm going to share with you that question and answer session that we had. I'm also going to put some videos on the screen as I'm kind of sharing some of my tips and ideas with you all, so you can get a sneak peek into the party and what we got to do, and all the fun that we had together. It was just the best morning. Really great. So, all right, let's start with some of my tips. Tip number one, and I'm going to look at my notes so I don't forget. Choose a theme and carry it out throughout all that you're doing for your party. So, of course, garden party, there's your theme, but really, for me, it was about using the theme or imagery of flowers. So everything from my invitations to how I decorated for the party, to how I decorated the platters of food that I baked, how I gave away a few little giveaways. It was all flowers, flowers, flowers. So you'll learn more about that as we go through the other steps. All right, second idea, of course, is food and drink. You need to have something, whether you make it yourself or you buy it from the store. You really need to provide something food and drink related, and maybe if you can tie it to your theme, in this case garden party, the more the better. So I'll put some video on the screen of what my buffet table looked like. I love to do occasionally when I entertain, do buffets, do self-serve kinds of things, because it gets your guests moving around. It's more informal, more casual, gets people talking and gets them active. So anyhow, in terms of the food, I did a lot of baking, and I baked some, my best recipe actually for pound cake, cream cheese pound cake, by the way, and some double chocolate banana bread, some peanut butter blondies, I did fruit cups, fresh fruit, salad, and the one thing I didn't cook myself were the bagels. I had my husband run early in the morning to grab some fresh bagels. So we cut those in small, manageable sizes. And so anyways, that's the only thing that I didn't bake on my own or create on my own. But you know what? You don't have to, like I said. However, people really like that. And what I would say about food and drink is do as much of it ahead as time. So I did my baking earlier in the week, froze all those wonderful things that I baked. Then the night before the party, I took those baked goods out and let them thaw overnight in the fridge. And then all I had to do in the morning was cut them up and place them on platters. So that couldn't be easier. The other thing you might have seen in the little video is that I like to serve things like for instance, fruit salad. When I have a crowd, I like to pre-portion those so that I'm not just having them come up to a fruit bowl and, they're all having to use the spoon and serve themselves. I go ahead and pre-portion those, and I just happen to find some little clear plastic drinking glasses, very inexpensive, and I just put a portion of that and put those on platters so people could just pick up their fruit salad in a little cup and set it on their plate, and off they went. So it also speeds up the buffet line. And of course, people are thirsty. People need to have something to drink. And I like to offer, when I can, an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic option. And since this was a 9 to 12 morning party, I had a Prosecco station, or some people might call it a mimosa station. So I had some nice Prosecco, and I had a couple of different fruit juices that they could mix with their Prosecco to create their own mimosa. Again, it was self-serve, so it gets people talking to each other and, takes the responsibility off of me to be mixing drinks or pouring things for people. And I can then just be relaxed and talk with my guests. So that was really fun. And then, of course, I had I flavored the water this year with mint and lime. So I had some little flavored water and, of course, some nice, fresh, cold iced tea. Because, it's warm here in July in mid-Missouri. So I wanted something nice and cold and refreshing. So that was a lot of fun. And of course, I served them in wine glasses, and I was able to source little wine charms, and they were all floral related. So sticking with the theme, I had everybody put a wine charm on, because when you've got that many people drinking out of the exact same type of glass, you need to be able to tell them apart. So that's another way to incorporate the flowers in the theme. Last thing I did, and you might have seen that in the video, is I put edible flowers from my garden. Roses are edible. I decorated a lot of the platters with fresh flowers, and so, kept with that flower theme. All right, speaking of flowers, because I'm a gardener, because you all have been following my channel, you know that I grow lots of cut flowers, and I have a 2-acre pollinator habitat that is bursting with thousands. I'm looking out my window now. Thousands and thousands of flowers are in bloom right now. So I did a big harvest the day before the party and created lots of little simple bouquets and had them all around the house for the party. And that just adds beauty and fun to the theme. Okay, something else I did, and I'll put a video on the screen to describe it, is I decided to create a floral photo booth. And it could not have been simpler. I didn't create a big backdrop and, hang a bunch of stuff, although you can if you really want to go all out, but I decided to keep it simple. And so what I did was I took one of our antique mirrors, and I had my husband remove the mirror out of it so that all I was left with this beautiful decorative frame. And then I went to Hobby Lobby, I think it was, and I purchased some silk flowers. And anyways, I hot glued those into the 2 corners of the frame so that people could stand. In fact, they stood here. I invited them to come in the office, and they could stand here and over in the other area, anywhere they wanted to stand in here, and bring their cell phones and get in the photo booth and take some pictures of themselves. And then they sent them to me, and it was really sweet. So they had a little take home, a little memento in terms of pictures of themselves at the party using that simple floral frame. And it was just really fun to see them using that as a prop. So that was a lot of fun. Theme gifts. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to spend a lot of money on gifts, and I don't, and I didn't in this case. But if you can source something sweet and cute for your guests to take home to remember the party, besides the photos that they took using the frame that I decorated, I went on Amazon and I ordered a bunch of these fans, and they were all different colors, all different floral patterns. And I used them not only in the decor and decorating, but I also had a nice platter of these laid out in the living room so that everybody could pick their own fan. And not only are they pretty, but they were practical because, as you're going to hear in just a minute, we took a garden tour. And, by the time we got out in the garden tour, it was warm out. So all my guests could take their pretty little fans with them if they got a little overheated. And it really was a great, fun, practical gift. And then they got to take them home. So it didn't cost much, and it added some beauty and fun to the party. Okay, for this party, because I love to garden and I do garden coaching and I have a YouTube channel about gardening, I invited all my guests to submit a gardening question before they showed up to the house. And then after we had our food and our drink, we were able to gather together in my living room in a nice big circle. And I was able to read through their questions and share some answers. And I also invited my guests, some of which have a lot of gardening experience, also to chime in because they had some great answers to some of the questions as well. So it was interactive. They got to participate. And I can't tell you how great it turned out. I didn't know that people would really love that as much as they do. In fact, some of my sweet friends actually brought a notepad. So during the Q&A, they were jotting down notes. Some of them actually, I didn't know it at the time, but they videotaped and recorded the Q&A session so that they would have that information, later to reference. So that was really something that turned out way better than I thought it would. And it was a lot of fun, and people were really gracious about their questions and answers. So anyhow, all right. Another thing that I did, of course, was provide a garden tour. And so we got our fans and we walked around my property. I post garden tours every single month for you all to watch on YouTube. But I was able to take all of these sweet friends all around the property and show them what was growing in my garden. And that was really a lot of fun. They asked a lot of great questions. They made even some notes. They took pictures of some of my plants as inspiration for something that they might want to add to their own home gardens. Okay, last but not least, not everyone can do this, but I sure can. And I could not wait to take them into our pollinator habitat. So in my invitation to the party, I asked them to bring their own gardening pruners if they wanted to gather up and harvest bundles of beautiful wildflowers so they could take them home. And that was just dreamy to have all these friends with me where I'm at all the time and walking through the garden paths that we have mowed in our pollinator habitat and getting to see how much fun they had, gathering up bundles and bundles of Rudbeckia and coneflower and Monarda and some fleabane and a little bit of coreopsis that's left. It was just delightful. And for them to spy some pollinators that were out busy in the garden. So that was a lot of fun. So gosh, it was just a really great day. It was just so fun and hopefully memorable for my guests. And I'm planning to do another garden party next year. I did one last summer and this summer. And so I'm thinking, I had so much fun and so did they, that it'll need to be an annual event. So as promised, let's do that gardening Q&A. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using some of the questions that they submitted for my party that we actually talked about when they were all here. And just another thing, and I say this a lot on my channel, and I really do believe that you all have so much knowledge. Some of you have been gardening a long time and you have great ideas. And I know for sure that I am not an expert on all things, and I don't ever pretend to be on YouTube. I know what I know based on my own experience, and you all have a lot of great ideas as well. So I'm going to really encourage you to leave your comments or questions in the description below the video later. And I want to hear from you. You know, what questions do you have? Was there something that I covered today that you have more questions about or I didn't make clear? Please don't hesitate to ask questions and share your ideas. This is supposed to be a way for us to connect over gardening, our passion, things that we love and want to learn about. So please feel free to leave me some comments. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. First question was, what's the best time to plant spring bulbs and how do I plant them? So my answer is going to be based on Zone 6, mid-Missouri, where we have all 4 seasons and we get really cold winters and our ground freezes solid. So in my area of the country, you want to plant your spring bulbs like daffodils and tulips and crocus and hyacinth and all of those snowdrops. You want to plant them in the fall. And typically that's mid-October to mid-November for us. You want to make sure you get your bulbs in the ground before the ground freezes. That's the most important thing. Those of you who live in places where your ground doesn't freeze, lucky you, but in most parts of the country where the ground freezes, you need to get your bulbs in before that happens so they can get settled in the ground. So how deep to plant your bulbs? The basic rule of thumb is however big your bulb is, you want to plant it below the soil of the surface of the soil 3 times the size of the bulb. So, you know, little crocus bulbs, hyacinth bulbs, they're little bitty things, so they don't have to go very far. But some of my daffodil bulbs and my tulip bulbs can be large. So again, just use your bulb size as a gauge and go 3 times however tall the bulb is. Go that far deep in your soil, pack it in, you're good to go. Could not be easier. All right, let's take a look at another question. This is a great question, and I get this question a lot. I don't know if I've shared with you all, but I happen to do garden coaching, and I do it this year. I've decided to do it for free, sort of as a way of giving back to my family and friends who maybe don't watch my YouTube channels or don't have time to watch a lot of them, but they have a specific need. And so they reach out to me via text, social media. Sometimes I'll do Zoom calls with people. And sometimes I'll actually do site visits and look at their gardens and try to give them some coaching around them. But anyways, this is a biggie. So lots and lots of people who garden don't have drip irrigation set up, and I completely understand that. And I didn't have it set up for many years, which means if you don't have that set up and you're gardening in the ground, whether it's a vegetable, herb, or flowers, perennials, trees, you water by hand. In fact, I watered by hand for most of my gardening years until about, I think it was, we put drip in, I think 4 or 5 years ago. Game changer, but anyhow. So my answer to this question is, how can I tell how much I should water the garden? I don't have drip irrigation, I have to water by hand. Okay, my answer to this is based on things that you are growing in the ground, whether it's veggie and fruit and herb crops, whether they're raised beds or whether they're in the ground, or you know, flower beds where you have perennials and annuals. So I'm not talking about containers. That's a whole nother video on how to properly water your containers, but things that are growing in the ground. So I'm going to give all credit to my answer to Joe Lample, Joe Gardner. If you don't know about him, you need to. I will link I'll provide a link in the description below to a YouTube video. He's done 2 of them now on his method to help people understand how long you should be holding your hose at the base of your plant to water and how you figure that out. It is brilliant. It's the best example and answer to this question I have ever seen any gardener give. So here's how you do it. So I'm going to explain it, but if you go to the description below and find Joe's link, go watch his video because he'll show you how to do it rather than me just telling you. Okay, so in general, forever and ever, they've said when you have things in the ground, your crops, your plants need 1 inch of water a week. Okay, Well, what does that really mean? That doesn't really help me much. I don't really know what that means. So Joe did the science, the math, and he discovered that 1 inch of water covering 1 square foot is the equivalent of 0.62 gallons of water. So that's the first thing you need to know. All right, so then what you do is you take a container that you can mark with a Sharpie. It could be a bucket, it could be like a big, like a 2-gallon pitcher, whatever, that you can see into. And you want to mark, you want to measure 0.62 gallons into that. Okay, and then you want to make a mark where that is. All right, I mean, eyeball it if you're not exactly sure what 0.26 gallons is, right? It's not a full gallon, it's not a half of a gallon, it's sort of somewhere in between. It's a little over a half a gallon. Make a mark, and then whatever hose you typically use to water your plants, that's the hose you want to use. You might have an extender on there like a wand like I use, or you might have, or you might just have the open end of a hose. Doesn't matter. Whatever you would typically use to water your plants, you're going to start watering your plant. And as soon as you start putting start putting water in the container. And as soon as you start, you want to start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. As soon as the water level gets up to the 0.26 gallon mark that you've already made, then you're going to know how many seconds you should be standing at your plant giving it a drink. And you know, if you stand there for however many seconds it took to get to 0.62 gallons, that's how many seconds you need to be spraying your plants to give them a gallon of water a week. All right, let's take another question. All right, here it is. Some of my annual flowers are getting leggy and overtaking some of the other plants in my containers. Is it okay to prune them, and how much? 100%. Don't be afraid to prune. Prune, prune, prune away, especially annuals. We're talking about flowering annuals that you have in pots, containers, hanging baskets. If they're crowding out everybody else, if they're getting long and leggy and looking a little sad, cut them back. I would encourage you to start when you want to cut them back and give them a little trim. I wouldn't cut them back more than 1/3 of the total length of the plant. You can't put any plant back on, but you can take more off. So start out a little bit small, a little bit short, and then continue to prune back. That will revitalize your annual flowers. They actually like a haircut, some of them. They do really well with that. So don't be afraid if one's bullying out another one, or it's just not looking quite right and it's overgrowing something, cut it back. And especially annuals. Annuals grow super fast. They recover fast, and within a couple of weeks, they'll be putting on lots of new blooms and growing fast again. So don't worry too much about pruning your annuals if they need a little haircut. All right, let's get to another question. Oh, I get this one a lot, actually. Some of you on the YouTube channel have asked this, and so I think I'm going to need to do a whole video on fertilizing, how to fertilize all different kinds of plants. But in particular, here's this question about fertilizing. How often do you fertilize your flowers, like your annual flowers, and what do you use? So I always, when I plant them up, my annuals, whether I put them in the ground or I'm putting them in containers, I put 2 things in the soil with them. I use the Biotone. It's an organic fertilizer, Biotone root starter. You want to get the roots off to a really healthy start, especially with annuals. Annuals need to get their roots set out fast and grow fast because they don't live from year to year to year. They have a short season to get beautiful. So I put Biotone root starter in. It's a spoma product. And I put a slow release granular fertilizer in, made specifically for flowers and flowering annuals. And there are loads of them on the market. You know, the brand's not that important. Find one that you like. Google, fertilizer for annual flowers, slow release, and you'll get lots of options. Ask your nursery if you have a trusted nursery that you could get some advice from. They might have some recommendations and maybe probably have products to sell you. So that's what I do when I plant my annuals. And then I am almost always faithful Fertilizer Friday. In my garden, I fertilize everything that needs fertilization on Friday, and what I use every Friday on my hanging baskets and my pots and my containers with annual flowers and even those in the ground, I fertilize with a water-soluble fertilizer. So in the heat of the summer, I have to water every single day anyways. So on Fridays, instead of just giving them straight water, I give them a nice gourmet drink. And I just take that scoop of granular stuff, mix it up in the watering can, and I water every single one of my flowers with fertilizer. And when you do that, I promise you, your big, beautiful baskets full of petunias and verbena and all of that stuff will look spectacular all the way until frost if you're disciplined about feeding them, especially annuals. They have a short life, they're pumping out blooms, and they need to be fed. They just do. They can't continue to look gorgeous and beautiful without food. So that's what I use, and that's how often I fertilize. This is a great question because I want more people to get brave and try this. So here's the question. If I wanted to try to grow flowers from seed, which ones are the easiest to grow and where should I get my seed from? 3 types of flowers that I would recommend any beginning gardener sow directly in the ground from seed. And my top one would be zinnias, cosmos, and sunflowers. Those are 3 really easy seeds to germinate, to grow. They're no fuss plants. Yeah, I can't recommend those 3. So if you want to give it a try, I would really encourage you to do that. The other beauty about those 3 kinds of flowers I mentioned is they come in a giant array of colors, sizes, and shapes. So just do a little Google search and find what you like and just go for it. In terms of where to get your seed, there are seeds in all the big box stores and the garden centers, your local nursery. If you're a little bit picky in particular, after you get used to growing some of those things and you want specialty varieties, let me share with you where I go to get a lot of my seed. Johnny Seeds, Baker Creek, Swallowtail Seed, and Floret Flower Farm Seed. So if you're wanting to amp up your game and you want specific colors and varieties that a lot of the big box stores and Walmart and those kinds of places and Lowe's and Home Depot don't carry a lot of these varieties, you can order online. And I do that every year. That's what I spend my winter doing, is dreaming about the next year's garden and getting my seed order in order. So here's a tomato gardening question. What happened to my blooms? They look like they dried up and fell off, and now I don't have any tomatoes on the vine. So I'm going to speak about where I grow tomatoes in a warm part of the country, and many of you live there as well. Here's the thing to know about tomatoes that I didn't know for a long time, and that is when your temperatures get 90 degrees plus for days on end, that will stop your flowers on your tomato plants from forming, or those that have already formed those little yellow flowers, they might die, dry up, and fall off. It's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? We think, well, tomatoes are a summer crop, and they are, but really, in terms of when they set their flowers that are going to end up producing fruit, when it gets super duper duper hot, they shut down. And so that might have been probably what happened, because when my friend who asked the question, she said, that's exactly right. She said, we've had super, super hot, mid to upper 90s for the last 5 or 6 days. And that's exactly what happened, unfortunately, to her tomato. Here's another question. If I need to move a perennial that got planted in the wrong spot, been there many times, when is the best time to move that perennial? Ideally, in a perfect world, you would want to transplant, relocate any of your shrubs or perennials in the spring or in the fall before the ground freezes. However, life happens, and sometimes you just got to do it when you can do it. And if that's in the middle of a hot and humid summer, I would say go ahead and try it. But just know that your plant is really going to be in shock for a while and maybe on the struggle bus after you transplant it. Because not only have you uprooted it and that's traumatic for plants sometimes. But you're transplanting it into new soil in its new space in your garden, and it's having to also cope with tremendous heat, sunlight, humidity, etc. So just do that, but just know that you want to baby that plant. You really want to check on that plant every day. You want to check it for moisture. And actually, some people will shade their plants. I've seen some folks shade their new transplanted perennial or shrub for the first 4 or 5 days. If you can manage to do that, get creative, that might help. But in a perfect world, it's really best and healthiest for your plants to do a move in the spring or in the fall before the ground freezes. Hey everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I sure enjoyed making it for you. It was really fun for me to share a little insight to the recent garden party I had. Maybe some of you might be inspired to gather up some of your friends and have a little garden party of your own to celebrate the season and to celebrate what we all love doing. And I hope you enjoyed the Q&A session. You know, I get some questions from viewers like you, but I also get a lot of questions from my friends and family through my garden coaching. And so I hope you found that informative and helpful. And if it spurred some more questions for you about anything that I talked about today, please, I invite you to leave those questions and ideas in the comments section below. So until next time, and next time you'll probably find me out in the garden, digging in the soil. I wish everybody out there happy gardening.